Hi, my name is Devlin and I work for Motorwork, and today we're going to be showing you what to look out for when you're thinking about buying a Mark 7 Golf to make sure that you're not stuck with a lemon. So of course the first impression the car is going to make is its exterior cosmetics. Because everything in North America that isn't a Golf GTI is a pickup truck with no mud flaps, you're going to notice a lot of rock chips and a lot of paint chips on this if it doesn't have a paint protection film like this, or if it wasn't driven at a safe following distance behind other cars. But also you want to make sure that because this is a lowered car and then the Golf GTI in general is not sitting very high, you want to make sure they were aware of how low the front bumper was and they weren't smacking it into the ground every time they pulled out of a parking lot. There's a bunch of sensors on this for the parking sensors, adaptive cruise control. Make sure you walk around and see there's no cracks, dents, or any scratches around them that makes it look like the car's been hit. You want to make sure all of those are functioning. Like I was saying, this particular car has been lowered and it has a little bit of wheel poke. That's a specific setup the owner chose for this. Because of that, you'll want to make sure they haven't been curb rashed, they haven't been bumped into things. This works on both a stock car or a modified car, but cars like this where they're stuck out more, it's really something you want to watch out for. Badging as well on these red-backed badges. I've seen some reports that these are starting to peel. So you want to make sure that if it's there, if it's a cosmetic thing, you're going to worry about budget it into the price of getting it repaired, because it is something fairly common for these red badges to do. Another thing these cars are notoriously known for is their sunroof seals. They'll crack, they'll dry out, they'll cause leaking. So you want to look at your headliner to make sure there's no signs of water damage, and you also want to open the sunroof all the way and check the rubber seals in here to make sure there's no cracking, there's no damage. If you see anything like that, even if it doesn't leak yet, we recommend you just get it replaced. A side note when looking at a car like this that's been modified is check the name brands and the shop that installed all of the aftermarket modifications if it was done at a shop. If it was done at home, double check the work to see if it's been done correctly. Probably get a pre-purchase inspection to make sure that someone can get the car on a hoist and check underneath it to make sure that it's in good shape and that the aftermarket parts are of high quality. You want to make sure that the tire brands, that the wheel brands, that the coilover brands are all brands that you would put on a car if you were going to modify it in the first place. A low quality part put on by someone else is still your problem if you buy it. The interior of these cars is pretty well made and there's not that much to look out for. As I said, you're checking the headliner to make sure there's no water damage from a bad sunroof seal. You're also checking to make sure there's no aftermarket components that are tacky or at least poorly made. If someone just screwed a pair of pods into the top of the dashboard and has exposed wires and they're kind of run around in different places, that's pretty unfortunate looking. This particular car has an aftermarket gauge here that fits into the air conditioning vent and the heating vent. It's actually quite nicely laid out. If you didn't like it, you could revert this back to stock pretty quickly, and it just plugs into the OBD port, so there's no actual splicing of wiring. Those are the kind of mods that if you're okay with that, it'd be good to keep. You can also revert it, which is a nice sign to see. If someone's modified it in a way that you can't take it off, it's good, that's fine. You just want to make sure that it was done well. Another problem is on the center consoles, these plastic trim pieces, the metallic style around the DSG cars, has a tendency to peel up in front of where this cover comes down. That's something you want to look out for because it can kind of cut your fingers. It's not the most comfortable. It won't kill you, but it's uncomfortable. The owner of this car was telling me he's going to have that replaced shortly. It's actually a Volkswagen recall, so don't pay for that. Go to the Volkswagen dealership and tell them it's failing. Ensure everything works in the car electronically. I mean, windows, the touch screen, all the connectivity. You want to make sure your steering wheel controls work. You want to make sure all the high beams, the low beams, anything that you would normally check on a car like this. Now that you've checked the exterior and the interior of the car, we'll open the hood, look underneath it. And here is the heart of the car, the ubiquitous 2-liter Volkswagen Turbo 4-cylinder. It's a very common engine. It goes across almost all of them. I think this particular variation is called an E888, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of the 2-liter problems are the same across the board. Upper timing cover leaks, it's something you want to watch out for. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can even see one. It looks like there's residue coming out, but that might be from oil being added from an oil change. So I don't want to say that's not just the owner of this car having bad aim. Other things you might want to look out for is because of direct injection, after about 90,000 miles, the intake valves can have carbon built up on them. That's because these cars have the fuel spraying directly into the combustion chamber rather than into the intake manifold, which would clean off the intake valves as they go past to the combustion chamber. Because it doesn't happen, you need to get them cleaned. This isn't a Volkswagen specific thing. Almost every direct injection car has the same thing where you need to get the intake ports decarboned with the intake manifold off. That's something you want to look out for. Plugged PCV valves is another thing. So if you see emissions codes, that's quite likely something that could go wrong with the PCV valve. You also want to check out for if the oil changes were done ahead of time. Volkswagen kept increasing the service intervals with the oil changes on these cars, and we haven't actually noticed that be a good thing. If you have someone who is meticulous about the oil changes and did them sooner than Volkswagen recommended and has paperwork for that, that's a great sign because we have seen issues with these engines that have been following the Volkswagen guidelines. If you have someone who did extra maintenance on a car, that is a great car to snap up. Aftermarket intake and intake piping along with an aftermarket downpipe are all things this car has because it's modified. If you do see that, just make sure it looks like a quality install, that the name brand parts are of reputable companies, and that there's just no zip ties, no exposed wires, no things looking like it was just done poorly. I know where this was done because it's one of our mechanics' cars. It's really nicely done, but it's something you want to check out for if you are buying a modified one. If it's a stock one, just make sure it's clean, make sure that the air filter is clean, that it's well taken care of. Now that you've looked at the outside, the inside, you've opened the hood and you're okay with the car, you've got a couple bargaining chips that you're going to use to maybe get a better price, you're going to want to take it for a drive. Well, what are you looking for? At low speeds, you want to make sure that when you're coming away from a stop that the DSG doesn't shudder or anything, as well as the clutch actually. You don't want to make sure that shutter doesn't shudder either. You want to make sure that it does low speed well, that it shifts through the gears smoothly, all the regular things of going through a car. These DSG units, I mean, Volkswagen's been building them forever, but they still have their issues, so you want to make sure they're in good shape. You want to make sure the manual mode works, you want to make sure all your different driving modes work, so you want to make sure there's a noticeable change between sport suspension and normal suspension, as well as sport driving transmission mode and regular driving transmission mode. And as I've said before, you're not going to want to just go on a joyride in someone else's car, but you do want to make sure that it builds boost. You want to make sure everything's functioning as it should be. So this car is building boost, shifting gears, it's all working. There's no check engine lights that come on after that due to a boost leak. If the car has been modified, I mean, the DSGs are pretty good for a decent amount of power. The manual transmissions, they're solid transmissions, but their clutches are basically at the limit of their power right from the factory. So if you have any sort of modifications on a stock clutch, check to see if it slips, it probably does, and then get yourself a new clutch or barter that into the price, because that's going to be something it's going to need if you're buying a modified manual transmission Mark 7. Test the adaptive cruise control, test the parking sensors, test everything like that. Do hard turns on the front suspension at low speeds to make sure there's no clicking from CV axles. I know the Mark IVs have a bad problem when they're lowered like this of clicking, and we've noticed it on a couple of Golf Rs that come to the shop that we've made custom axles for. So double check that when you are driving it at low speeds and doing full lock-to-lock turns, there's no clicking while you turn slowly at low speed. The last thing I forgot to mention when I was under the hood of the car is the plastic oil pans on these. I'm not going to put this on a hoist because it's realistic that you won't be able to see anything from under this car. It's quite low, both in stock form and in this form. But you want to check out for the plastic oil pan, you want to make sure there's no leaks coming from the bottom of it, and you want to make sure that on the oil service history that you can see they've replaced the drain plug. It is a replacement every time. Plastic drain plug, plastic oil pan, they can get a new drain plug every oil change. If you don't see that having been done, you might have an oil leak down the road. We would recommend a hot oil flush and a new drain plug if you do find a car that doesn't have any history of the drain plugs being done. The plastic oil pans aren't too known for leaking, but because these are low cars, if it's been smucked into something, they're very known for cracking and then leaking after that. There's no give to plastic. So after all that, I do still recommend getting a pre-purchase inspection, even though these cars are pretty robust. If it drives straight, drives smooth, doesn't have any seeming warning signs or any warning lights, I think you're probably going to have a solid car. There's a reason these cars are sold worldwide so well. But to go check the bushings, the dog bone mount, things that you won't be able to see on the ground, which is why I'm not going to put it on a hoist in this video. We recommend going to get this car inspected by a shop just to see what else might be wrong with it that you can't see. But if it drives well, it's very likely you have a solid car. They're super fun. I really like how they hit boost, and they're really nice handling little things. And with so many of them sold, if you do want to modify it once you buy it, it's an amazing open platform for you to do so. If you are interested in getting your own car inspected, we do pre-purchase inspections here at Motorwork. And if you have any more questions about these cars, please feel free to comment down below or reach out to us and we will be happy to answer any questions. I hope this was helpful in your search for a Mark 7, and happy motoring.